Bajo el brillo engañoso de una vida perfecta, un destino cuidadosamente construido está a punto de derrumbarse. En el instante en que un hombre poderoso se dirige hacia el día más importante de su vida, una figura del pasado emerge entre el polvo y el cansancio. Una mujer marcada por la miseria, la soledad y un secreto imposible de ignorar. Lo que debía ser un triunfo se convierte en una herida abierta. Lo que debía quedar enterrado resurge para exigir respuestas. Y lo que nadie imaginaba está a punto de cambiarlo todo. Si esta historia te atrapó desde el primer suspiro, suscríbete al canal para ayudarnos a llegar a los primeros 1000 inscritos. The carriage rattled over the cobblestone streets of New York City, the air thick with the scent of coal smoke and horse manure. Alexander Harrington gripped the edge of his seat, his heart pounding not from the jostle of the wheels, but from the weight of the day ahead. At 35, he was the epitome of Gilded Age success, a railroad magnate whose empire stretched from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. His tailored black frock coat, crisp white shirt, and silk cravat spoke of wealth earned through ruthless deals and sleepless nights. Today, he would marry Eliza Vanderbilt, the daughter of another titan, sealing alliances that would double his fortune. The wedding at Trinity Church promised to be the social event of the season, with champagne flowing like the Hudson and guests in their finest silks and top hats. But as the carriage turned onto Fifth Avenue, something caught his eye through the lace-curtained window. A woman, bent under a load of splintered firewood, staggered along the sidewalk. Her dress, once fine calico, now torn and muddied, clung to her swollen belly. Dirt streaked her face, and her hair, matted and wild, escaped a frayed bonnet. She paused, gasping, one hand pressing against her side. Alexander's breath hitched. It couldn't be. Not here, not now. "Stop the carriage!" he barked to the driver. The horses whinnied, wheels grinding to a halt amid honking horns from passing hansoms. Alexander flung open the door, his polished boots hitting the pavement with a thud. He strode toward her, the crowd parting like the Red Sea before Moses. Whispers rippled through the pedestrians. Fine ladies in bustled gowns clutching their reticules, gentlemen in bowlers averting their eyes. "Olivia?" His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. She looked up, her green eyes, those eyes he had once lost himself in, widening in shock. 5 years had passed since he'd last seen her, since that fateful night when ambition tore them apart. Olivia Langford, daughter of a modest printer, had been his secret flame in the shadows of his rising star. They dreamed of a simple life, away from the cutthroat world of tycoons and trusts. But Alexander had chosen the path of power, leaving her with promises he never kept. She dropped the wood, bundles scattering across the walk. "Alexander!" Her voice was hoarse, laced with exhaustion. Up close, the signs of hardship etched her face, hollow cheeks, chapped lips, and that belly. It swelled unmistakably, rounding out her frame under the threadbare shawl. He reached for her arm, but she flinched back. "What are you doing here? Like this?" The words tumbled out, laced with horror. The street buzzed around them. A newsboy hawked headlines about the latest stock scandal. Oblivious to the drama unfolding, Olivia's gaze dropped to the ground, her hands cradling her abdomen protectively. "Surviving, that's all. You wouldn't understand." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Or maybe you do. The man who builds empires while others beg for scraps." Alexander's mind reeled. Pregnant. Alone. Carrying wood like some immigrant laborer in the tenements. Who was the father? The question burned, but he shoved it down. "Come with me, now, you can't." "Not in your condition." She shook her head, eyes flashing defiance. "To your wedding? I saw the announcements in the papers. Eliza Vanderbilt. How fitting. The queen of high society." Her voice dripped sarcasm, but tears glistened on her lashes. The crowd murmured louder now. A matron in ostrich feathers gasping behind her fan. "Please," he urged, glancing at his pocket watch. The ceremony was in less than an hour. His best man, Jonathan Pierce, would be pacing at the church, cigar in hand. But this shattered everything. Let me help. At least tell me. A sharp pain twisted her features, and she doubled over, clutching her belly. It's the child, she gasped. Alexander's world tilted. He scooped her up without thinking, her slight weight no match for his resolve. She protested weakly, but he carried her to the carriage, barking orders at the driver to head to his townhouse instead of the church. As the door slammed shut, sealing them in the dim interior, Olivia leaned against the velvet cushions, breathing ragged. "You can't do this, Alexander. Your life. It's not for us." He knelt before her, his hands hovering, afraid to touch. "What happened to you after I left?" Her eyes met his, raw, with old wounds. "You left me with nothing but memories. And now, this." She placed his hand on her belly, where a faint kick stirred beneath. Alexander froze, a surge of emotion crashing over him. Guilt, wonder, terror. Was it his? The timing. It fit too perfectly. The carriage sped on, but the path to the altar had vanished. In its place loomed a reckoning, one that threatened to upend his carefully built world. Outside, the city thrummed with indifference, but inside, secrets long buried clawed their way to the surface. Alexander's mind raced. He couldn't marry Eliza now, not with this ghost from his past demanding justice. But what price would he pay? The tycoons of New York didn't forgive scandals. And Olivia, she carried more than wood. She carried a truth that could destroy them both. As the townhouse came into view, its gas lamps flickering in the morning haze, Alexander whispered, "Whatever it takes, I'll make this right." But deep down, he knew, some rights came at the cost of everything. The door opened, and the real storm began. The townhouse on Fifth Avenue loomed like a fortress of polished brownstone and wrought iron, its windows glowing with the soft flicker of gaslight. Alexander carried Olivia up the marble steps, her weight light, but her presence heavy in his arms. The doorman, a stout Irishman named Patrick, gaped from the doorway, his livery askew. "Mr. Harrington, sir? The church, your wedding—" "Not now, Patrick," Alexander snapped, brushing past. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax polish and fresh roses from the conservatory. Crystal chandeliers hung silent, waiting for evening parties that now seemed a lifetime away. He eased Olivia onto a velvet chaise in the drawing room, her muddied dress leaving faint stains on the fabric. Servants scattered like startled pigeons, a maid in starched apron vanishing into the kitchens, the butler materializing with a tray of brandy. "Fetch Dr. Ellis at once," Alexander ordered the butler, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. He shrugged off his frock coat, rolling up his sleeves. The room, with its heavy oak paneling and portraits of stern Harrington ancestors, felt suddenly confining. This was his world, opulent, ordered, a testament to his climb from a clerk's son to railroad kingpin. Breakfasts of silver service, evenings at Delmonico's with senators and steel barons. Etiquette ruled here. Gentlemen bowed, ladies curtsied, and scandals were whispered behind gloved hands. Never voiced. Olivia's breathing steadied, but her eyes darted around the grandeur. She pulled the shawl tighter over her belly, the swell impossible to hide now in the room's unforgiving light. "This place. It's like a palace for ghosts," she murmured, her voice rough from disuse. At 28, she had once matched his fire with her own, sharp wit from long hours in her father's print shop, dreams scribbled on scrap paper. Now, lines of wear etched her brow, and her hands, calloused from scrubbing floors or whatever labours fate had thrust upon her, trembled as she accepted a glass of water. Alexander knelt again, closer this time. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." His mind flashed to their last days together, 5 years prior, stolen walks in Central Park, her laughter like church bells amid the rustle of horse-drawn carriages. He'd promised her the world, but the world demanded his soul. A merger with the Vanderbilt lines, a seat on the board of the New York Central. Ambition had whispered louder than love. He'd left her with a locket, a vague assurance of return. Instead, he'd vanished into boardrooms and balls, building an empire on iron tracks and iron will. She sipped the water, eyes distant. After you left, Father died. The shop folded under debts. I wrote to you, letters that came back unopened. A pause, her fingers tracing the chaise fringe. I took in sewing, then washing, boarded with families in the Lower East Side, the tenements, rats in the walls, cries at night, when I realized about the child. Her hand rested on the curve again, a protective shield. I couldn't stay, not with the whispers. They called me ruined, a fool for trusting a man like you. Alexander's throat tightened. The child, the kick he'd felt, it mirrored the timeline of their passionate nights, but doubt gnawed. Had she waited or turned to another in despair? He pushed the thought aside. And now, how did you end up on Fifth Avenue hauling wood like a common drudge? Work at a boarding house uptown. The owner, a widow named Mrs. Grady, lets me earn my keep. But the pains started this morning. False ones. The midwife said, I needed coin for the doctor, so... The wood. She glanced at the scattered bundles by the door, forgotten in the rush. Outside, the city hummed, vendors crying their wares, the distant clang of cable cars snaking up the avenue. The butler returned, clearing his throat. Sir, a telegram from the church. Mr. Pierce inquires after your delay. And Miss Vanderbilt's carriage has arrived early. Alexander's blood ran cold. Eliza, poised, pedigreed, with her upswept auburn hair and gowns from Paris worth a fortune. Their engagement had been announced in the Times, a match of dynasties. She expected vows exchanged under stained glass, not this domestic upheaval. Tell them, I'm detained on business, he said, waving the man away. But the lie sat heavy. Business. This was personal wreckage. He turned back to Olivia, searching her face for the girl he'd known. You stay here. Rest. I'll handle the rest. She laughed softly without mirth. Handle it like you handled us? Her eyes softened, though, holding a flicker of the old tenderness. Alexander, that child. It's yours. I never. A contraction hit then, mild but sharp, making her wince. He placed his hand over hers, feeling the life between them, a bridge across the chasm of years. Dr. Ellis arrived in a flurry of black bag and starched collar, an elderly man with a reputation among the elite for discretion. He examined Olivia behind a screen, murmuring assurances. Rest and warmth, miss. The babe is strong, but you must take care. As he left, prescribing tonics and bed rest, a knock echoed from the foyer. Insistent, imperious. Patrick's voice filtered in. Miss Vanderbilt, ma'am. The master is occupied. Eliza's reply cut like crystal. Occupied? On our wedding day? Her heels clicked across the marble, and she swept into the drawing room, a vision in ivory silk and lace, her veil trailing like a banner of expectation. Bustled skirts swished, and her gloved hands clutched a bouquet of orchids. Behind her, Jonathan Pierce hovered, his moustache twitching in confusion, top hat in hand. Eliza's blue eyes widened at the sight. Olivia on the chaise, Alexander rising hastily. "What in heaven's name is this?" she demanded, voice laced with the clipped precision of old money. The room froze, hierarchies clashing like storm clouds, the Tycoon's fiancé versus the fallen ex, social codes fracturing in an instant. Alexander stepped forward, words failing. "Eliza, I can explain." But her gaze locked on Olivia's belly, and a shadow crossed her perfect features. Whispers from the hall, servants gossiping, sealed the tension. A rumor born here could spread to every salon in Manhattan by nightfall. As Eliza's lips parted for a retort, a faint envelope slipped from her reticule, unnoticed at first. It bore a seal, the Vanderbilt crest, and scrawled words that promised deeper intrigue. Eliza's eyes narrowed, flicking from Olivia's pale face to the unmistakable swell beneath her shawl. The orchids in her bouquet trembled slightly in her grip, petals scattering like fragile accusations onto the Persian rug. "Explain!" she echoed, her voice a whip-crack in the heavy silence. The drawing room, with its gilded mirrors and velvet drapes, seemed to shrink around them. Jonathan Pierce shifted uncomfortably by the door, his broad shoulders filling the frame, but he said nothing. Loyalty to Alexander warring with the shock etching his features. Alexander rose fully now, his shirt sleeves rolled, a stark contrast to the groom he should have been. Sweat beaded on his brow, not from the morning's mild chill, but from the unraveling of his meticulously planned life. "Eliza, this isn't what it seems. Olivia, she's in need. The child." Eliza interrupted, stepping closer, her silk skirts whispering against the floorboards. She was a vision of Gilded Age poise, corseted waist cinched to perfection, lace veil pinned with pearls that caught the gaslight. At 24, she embodied the Vanderbilt legacy, sharp, unyielding, groomed for alliances that built fortunes. But beneath that composure, hurt flickered like a shadow. "You mean to tell me, on the morning of our vows, you bring a woman in her condition into your home? Our home?" Olivia stirred on the chaise, her hand pressing against her side as another twinge rippled through her. She met Eliza's gaze steadily, though exhaustion lined her eyes. "It's not his doing, miss, not any more." Her words hung soft but firm, carrying the weight of years unspoken. The room smelled of her damp wool and the faint metallic tang of fear, clashing with the room's usual scent of lavender sachets and polished mahogany. Jonathan cleared his throat, finally stepping forward. "Alexander, old friend, the guests are gathering. The bishop himself is there. The delay could cost you more than a few raised eyebrows." He was Alexander's right hand in business, a Harvard man with a mustache like a broom and a knack for smoothing over railroad disputes. But even he glanced at Olivia's belly, piecing together the scandal's shape. Alexander's mind whirled. The wedding wasn't just a ceremony, it was a contract, inked in society pages and whispered deals. Marrying Eliza meant Vanderbilt backing for his western expansions, tracks piercing the Rockies, coal rights in Pennsylvania. Refuse now, and the Tycoons would circle like vultures. Whispers of jilting would spread from Delmonico's to the Union Club, branding him unreliable, a man ruled by sentiment over steel. Yet here was Olivia, the woman he'd abandoned, carrying what could only be his child. The kick he'd felt earlier echoed in his chest, a demand for reckoning. "I can't proceed," he said at last, the words tasting like ash. He faced Eliza squarely, his voice low but resolute. "Not like this. Olivia needs help. Our help. And the truth. It changes everything." Eliza's laugh was brittle, echoing off the panelled walls. "The truth? You speak of truth, while the city waits for our procession. My father will hear of this. The papers will feast on it. Harrington's mystery bride or some such rot." She tossed the bouquet onto a side table, stems snapping. Her gloved hand flew to her reticule, and that's when the envelope fluttered free, landing with a soft thud near Olivia's foot. It lay there, wax seal unbroken, the Vanderbilt crest gleaming like a warning. Olivia's eyes caught it first. She bent slightly, ignoring the ache in her back, and picked it up. "What's this?" she murmured, turning it over. The scrawled words on the front, "For Alexander's eyes only," stared back in elegant script. Eliza snatched it away, color draining from her cheeks. "Nothing. A family matter." But her haste betrayed her. Alexander's gaze sharpened. In their world, secrets were currency. Traded in back rooms over brandy and cigars. "Give it to me," he demanded, extending his hand. The air thickened, charged with the unspoken rules of their class. Privacy was sacred, but betrayal was poison. Eliza hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, she thrust it at him, the paper crinkling. He broke the seal, scanning the contents under the chandelier's glow. It was from Cornelius Vanderbilt himself, a terse note confirming the merger terms, but with a codicil. Eliza's dowry hinged on discretion in all matters. Buried deeper, a line chilled him. "Beware the ghosts of old alliances. They derail more than trains." Had the old man known? Spies in the tenements, perhaps, or whispers from Alexander's past liaisons? "This changes nothing for us," Eliza insisted, though her voice wavered. She straightened, reclaiming her veil like armor. "You owe me and my family an explanation, fully, or the wedding proceeds without you, and the world learns of your indiscretions." The threat landed like a brake on loose wheels. Slander could follow. Hints in the Tribune, caricatures in Puck magazine showing him as a cad, unfit for boardrooms. Allies like Jonathan might waver. Mentors from his early days, the bankers who'd loaned his first stake, would recall unpaid debts. Not financial, but emotional. Alexander folded the letter, tucking it into his vest. "Then call it off. Send the guests home. I'll face the fallout." His eyes met Olivia's, a silent vow passing between them. She nodded faintly, trust flickering amid the pain. Eliza recoiled as if slapped. "You're choosing her? A washerwoman with a bastard child?" The slur hung ugly, shattering the room's fragile etiquette. Jonathan gasped, stepping between them. "Enough!" the lawyer barked. "This isn't the church vestibule. Alexander, think your empire." But Alexander's decision crystallized. He helped Olivia to her feet, her arm light on his. "Send word to the church. The wedding is postponed, indefinitely." The words broke the status quo like a derailment, rails buckling under impossible weight. Eliza stormed out, skirts billowing, Jonathan trailing with apologies. The front door slammed, echoing through the house. Patrick peeked in, wide-eyed. "Sir? The carriages." "Handle it," Alexander replied, guiding Olivia toward the stairs. The townhouse, once a symbol of ascent, now felt like a battlefield. As they climbed, her hand squeezed his, a first concrete obstacle surmounted, but the real barriers loomed. Vanderbilt wrath, societal exile, and the child's uncertain future. Upstairs, in a guest chamber with canopied bed and lace curtains, Olivia sank onto the mattress. "You've ruined yourself for me," she whispered, eyes searching his. He knelt by the bed, brushing a strand from her face. "Or saved us." But as the clock struck noon, a knock rattled the door. Jonathan, breathless, with news of the first whispers already circulating on the avenue. The rupture had begun, forcing Alexander into a new world of choices, where love clashed with legacy, and every step risked the fall. The afternoon sun slanted through the lace curtains of the guest chamber, casting long shadows across the four-poster bed, where Olivia lay propped on pillows. The room smelled of fresh linens and the faint herbal tang of the tonic Dr. Ellis had left behind. Alexander paced the Persian rug, his boots muffled on the thick weave, while Jonathan hovered by the door, had clutched in his hands like a shield. The lawyer's face was flushed, his moustache drooping under the weight of bad tidings. "Whispers are already flying, Alexander," Jonathan said, voice low and urgent. "A footman from the church saw you carry her in. By now it's reached the ears of Mrs. Astor herself, the wedding postponement. They're calling it a jilting." Eliza stormed off to her father's mansion, and the guests scattered like confetti in a gale. Alexander stopped pacing, rubbing his jaw where stubble shadowed the clean-shaven groom he'd been that morning. "Let them talk," I won't hide this." His eyes flicked to Olivia, who watched them both with quiet intensity. Her colour had returned some, but the swell of her belly rose like a challenge under the borrowed nightgown, a simple cotton shift from the maid's quarters, far from the silks she deserved. Olivia shifted, wincing slightly. "Talk? In this city, talk is a weapon sharper than any blade." She spoke softly, but her green eyes held the fire he'd remembered from their youth. 5 years of hardship hadn't dimmed it. If anything, it burned steadier now. Jonathan cleared his throat. "Precisely. The Vanderbilts won't let this slide. Cornelius is a bulldog, holds grudges like stock certificates. And Eliza, she's no wilting flower. Expect repercussions in the papers by evening." He glanced at his pocket watch, the gold chain glinting. "I should go. Damage control at the club. But Alexander, think of your board." The merger can wait," Alexander cut in, his tone brooking no argument. Jonathan nodded reluctantly and slipped out, the door clicking shut behind him. Alone now, Alexander pulled a chair close to the bed. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken years. He reached into his vest pocket and drew out the locket, the one he'd given her long ago. A simple gold oval, engraved with their initials intertwined. He'd found it tucked in his desk drawer that morning, a relic from stolen nights in the print shop's back room. "I kept this," he said, placing it in her palm. Her fingers closed around it, the metal warm from his touch. Olivia traced the engraving, her thumb lingering on the curves. "I thought you'd thrown it away, like the promises." But her voice softened, no longer edged with bitterness. A small kick fluttered under her hand, and she smiled faintly, the first real one since the street. Alexander covered her hand with his, feeling the life stir again. No words passed, just the shared warmth, a bridge mending in that quiet moment. His thumb brushed her knuckles, a gentle rove that spoke of regret and rekindled care. Downstairs, the doorbell chimed, sharp as a judge's gavel. Patrick's voice murmured in the hall, followed by the rustle of skirts and clipped footsteps. Alexander tensed. "Stay here. I'll handle it." He descended to the drawing room, where 2 women waited. Mrs. Penelope Worthington, a matron of society with iron-grey hair piled high and a bustled gown of deep burgundy velvet, and her daughter Clara, a slip of a girl in pale blue taffeta, feathers nodding from her hat. They were neighbours of sorts. Worthington's husband sat on the same railroad board as Alexander, and their visit reeked of curiosity masked as concern. "Mr. Harrington," Mrs. Worthington began, her voice honey over steel as she extended a gloved hand. "We heard of your misfortune at the church. Such a pity, and on such a fine day." Her eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles, scanned the room as if hunting scandal. Clara fidgeted with her reticule, whispering to her mother. Alexander bowed slightly, forcing civility. "Ladies, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Mrs. Worthington settled onto the chaise without invitation, her skirts fanning out. "Word travels fast on Fifth Avenue. A postponed wedding, with the Vanderbilts involved. We came to offer condolences and perhaps advice." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "One hears tales of a woman, in delicate circumstances, brought here unannounced. It's most irregular." Clara blushed, averting her eyes, but her mother pressed on. "Society has rules, Mr. Harrington, rules that protect us all. A man in your position must be cautious. Whispers of indiscretion could tarnish more than your name." The subtle barb landed, humiliation wrapped in etiquette. Alexander's jaw tightened. Upstairs, Olivia might hear every word through the thin floors. He imagined her clutching the locket, alone with the weight of judgment. "My personal matters are just that. Personal," he replied evenly. "But rest assured, no harm comes to this house. Mrs. Worthington's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, but harm follows scandal like shadows at dusk. The ladies' auxiliary meets tomorrow. Expect questions, and the Times, well, their society column is merciless." She rose, smoothing her gown. Clara followed, casting a sympathetic glance at Alexander, micro-mercy in a sea of friction. As they departed, Mrs. Worthington paused at the door. "Do send our regards to whoever requires them." The implication hung, the fallen woman, unfit for their circles. Alexander closed the door, leaning against it. The visit had tested the waters, rejection veiled as propriety, class lines drawn in velvet. He climbed the stairs slowly, the locket's weight echoing in his mind. It had appeared like a talisman, starting something new, not just memory, but a vow to protect what they'd lost. In the chamber, Olivia looked up, the locket open on her lap, revealing the faded miniature of them both from happier days. "I heard," she said simply. Their eyes met, a shared silence deepening the bond. His hand found hers again, lingering longer this time, a small advance amid the gathering storm. But outside, a newsboy's cry pierced the air. "Extra! Harrington Vanderbilt nuptials in chaos!" The first visible consequence splashed in ink, promising wider fallout. Alexander's grip tightened. The shadows of opposition lengthened, Vanderbilt spies perhaps, or Eliza's own hand stirring the pot. What move would come next? The evening shadows lengthened across the townhouse, turning the gas lamps into pools of amber light that danced on the oak walls. Alexander sat by Olivia's bedside, the locket still open between them like a fragile bridge over troubled waters. The air hung heavy with the scent of chamomile tea steaming from a silver pot on the side table, a remedy the cook had brewed under strict orders. Outside, the clamour of Fifth Avenue faded to a distant murmur, carriages rattling home, vendors winding down their cries. But inside, a different storm brewed, one of words long overdue. Olivia's fingers traced the miniature portrait again, her touch light, as if afraid it might vanish. The image captured them young, unscarred, her with loose curls framing a hopeful smile, him with that boyish grin before the boardrooms hardened his jaw. "We were dreamers then," she said softly, her voice gaining strength from the rest. The pains had eased with the doctor's tonics, leaving her pale but steady, propped against lace-trimmed pillows in the borrowed nightgown. At 28, the years showed in the faint lines around her eyes. But her gaze held the same quiet fire that had drawn him to her in the print shop's ink-scented back room. Alexander leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the rolled sleeves of his shirt exposing forearms marked by faint scars from early railroad surveys, reminders of the gritty climbs that built his fortune. "I was a fool. Ambition blinded me. Your father's shop. Those evenings debating books by candlelight, I traded it for contracts and coal dust." Guilt twisted in his chest, raw as an open wound. He'd buried those memories under ledgers and ledgers more, convincing himself survival demanded sacrifice. But now, with her here, the past clawed free. She closed the locket, pressing it to her palm. A soft kick rippled beneath the covers, and she placed his hand there again, the warmth seeping through cotton. "Feel that? Strong like you always said we'd be." Her eyes met his, vulnerability cracking the armor. "After you left, the letters. I sent dozens, begging at first, then angry. When they stopped returning, I sold what I could. Father's press fetched pennies. I sewed by gaslight in attics, hands bleeding from needles. The tenements swallowed me, families crammed in rooms no bigger than this closet, children coughing through nights, and when I knew about the babe—" Her voice faltered, hand cradling the swell. "I hid it. Pride, mostly. Didn't want your pity." He squeezed her hand gently, the gesture lingering, a silent promise blooming in the space between. No grand declarations, just the steady pressure, humanizing the Tycoon into the man she'd loved. Pity, never. Regret, yes. Every merger I sealed, I saw your face in the contracts. The Vanderbilts. Eliza. It was a cage of my own making. He confessed then, words tumbling like derailed cars, the pressure from mentors, the fear of poverty's return after his father's early death in a mill accident. Duty had chained him. Luto for lost chances festering unspoken. I thought power would fill the hole. It only widened it. Olivia shifted closer, the bed creaking softly. The locket became their anchor, passed between them as stories unfolded. Her Luto for a simple life stolen, his culpa for choices that echoed in empty ballrooms. Laughter slipped in, tentative. A shared memory of sneaking apples from a vendor during a park stroll, juice staining their lips as they hid from chaperones. The tension eased, replaced by a warmth that shifted the room's air, intimate without crossing lines. His thumb brushed her wrist in reassurance, her head tilting toward his shoulder in quiet trust. For the first time since the street, hope flickered, fragile but real. A knock shattered the moment, sharp, insistent from the hallway. Patrick entered, bearing a silver tray with a sealed envelope, the wax stamped with the Vanderbilt crest. "From Miss Eliza's courier, sir." Delivered discreetly, but the lad lingered, watching the house. Alexander's blood chilled. The antagonist stirred, Eliza's hand reaching from her gilded perch. He broke the seal, scanning the elegant script by lamplight. It was terse. "Your detainment spreads like fire. Father demands a meeting at dawn. Refuse, and the tracks to your west halt. Eliza." No warmth, just the cold machinery of power, espionage in the form of watchful eyes, a Ricardo that reeked of threats. The merger dangled like a noose. Vanderbilt spies no doubt already piecing together Olivia's tale from street whispers. Olivia read over his shoulder, her face paling. "They'll crush us. For what? A signature on paper?" The intimacy recoiled, the emotional tide ebbing as reality crashed in. Alexander folded the letter, tucking it away, but the damage lingered, a reminder that their fragile reconnection floated on society's treacherous currents. As night deepened, another sound pierced the quiet, the distant toll of Trinity Church bells, mocking the vows never spoken. Dawn loomed with Vanderbilt wrath, and with it a separation neither could ignore. Dawn broke over New York like a reluctant witness, grey light filtering through the heavy drapes of the townhouse library. Alexander stood by the tall windows, the Vanderbilt letter crumpled in his fist, its threats echoing in his mind. The room smelled of leather-bound books and stale cigar smoke from late-night dealings, a sanctuary turned war room. Olivia slept upstairs, her rest uneasy, but he couldn't join her. Not with Cornelius Vanderbilt summoning him at first light. The old Commodore, 80-something, sharp as a switchblade, didn't call for tea. He called for blood. Patrick scratched at the door, his livery rumpled from a sleepless night. "Sir, the carriage is ready and more trouble. A messenger from the Union Club. Urgent." Alexander nodded grimly, grabbing his overcoat from the hall rack. The wool hung heavy, a shield against the chill wind whipping down Fifth Avenue. He stepped out into the crisp air, where newsboys already hawked the morning editions. One headline caught his eye. "Harrington jilts Vanderbilt heiress. Scandal at Trinity." His stomach knotted. Eliza's handiwork, no doubt, leaks to the press, turning delay into disaster. Pedestrians glanced his way, whispers trailing like smoke from coal stoves. A matron in a fur-trimmed mantle crossed the street to avoid him, her skirts swishing disdain. The Vanderbilt mansion on Washington Square loomed, a bastion of red brick and iron gates, guarded by footmen in crisp uniforms. Alexander's driver pulled up, horses stamping in the frost. He was ushered into a cavernous study, walls lined with nautical charts and oil paintings of clipper ships, the Commodore's empire, before rails claimed his ambition. Cornelius sat behind a massive oak desk, his white beard stark against a black suit, eyes like polished flint. Eliza stood by the fireplace, arms crossed over her emerald morning gown, the lace at her cuffs trembling with barely contained fury. No warmth here. The fire crackled low, casting long shadows. "Harrington!" Vanderbilt growled, voice graveled from years of barking orders across decks. He didn't rise, just jabbed a gnarled finger at a chair. "Sit, and explain why my daughter's wedding became the city's jest." Alexander lowered himself, spine straight. "Sir, it wasn't a jest. Olivia Langford, she's from my past, carrying my child. I couldn't proceed with lies between us." Eliza's laugh sliced the air, sharp and joyless. "Your child? Convenient timing, Alexander. After 5 years of silence? Or is it some tenement tale to cover your cold feet?" Her blue eyes blazed, but hurt lurked beneath, raw as an open seam. She'd been raised for this match, lessons in poise, dowry discussions over family dinners. Now it crumbled. Vanderbilt leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Past or not, boy, you've derailed more than my plans. The merger? Dead. My lawyers drew up papers last night. Your western lines lose our coal rights. No tracks without fuel." He slid a document across the desk, seals fresh and ominous. "And the board? They'll hear of this by noon. Indiscretion like yours sinks ships, or empires." The words hit like a coupling rod snapping. Alexander's railroads, his life's forge, depended on Vanderbilt alliances. Without them, suppliers would balk, investors flee. Public exposure, the Times already painted him a cad. Society columns would feast on Tycoon's bastard heir. Caricatures in Harper's Weekly showing him juggling hearts and rails. Allies like Jonathan might distance themselves, fearing taint. Isolation crept in, cold as the room's draft. "I won't let this destroy her," Alexander said, voice steady. "Olivia deserves better than scraps." Eliza stepped closer, her perfume, jasmine and power wafting sharp. "Better? You parade her through your home like a trophy of regret? My father built this city. You're a clerk's son playing king." She thrust a folded paper at him, a blackmail veiled as evidence. "This came to me last night, letters from her, begging you years ago, undelivered, but now, public if you push." Chantageum, pure and brutal. The antagonist rose, not just Vanderbilt's might, but Eliza's wounded pride fueling sabotage. Alexander's hands shook as he scanned the pages. Olivia's script. Desperate pleas he'd never seen, intercepted perhaps by his own staff or Vanderbilt spies. Trust fractured. How deep did the web go? A legal threat loomed too. Whispers of breach of promise suits, though unprovable, enough to smear. "You force my hand," Vanderbilt rumbled. "Leave now, or lose everything. The child? Your problem, not ours." Alexander rose, the document burning in his grip. The point of no return. He tore it in half, pieces fluttering to the rug like fallen leaves. "Then so be it. No merger, no wedding. I'll build without your shadow." The words sealed it, an action impossible to retract. Vanderbilt's face darkened. Eliza turned away, a single tear tracing her cheek, but the balance shattered. His reputation wounded publicly, alliances crumbling like dry earth. Back at the townhouse, the air felt thicker, charged with fallout. Servants averted eyes. Patrick handed him a telegram from Jonathan. "Board meeting called. Resign or defend. Whispers of fraud. Vanderbilt push." Quader de Status hit hard. Isolation in his own home. The Tycoon reduced to pariah. He climbed to Olivia's chamber, where she sat by the window, locket in hand, gazing at the avenue's bustle. Sunlight caught her hair, loose now, framing a face pale with worry. "What did they say?" she asked, voice small. He sank onto the bed's edge, defeat heavy. "They'll ruin me. The lines, the name, gone. For us." He took her hand, but she pulled back gently, eyes searching his. "Ruin? Alexander, I won't be your anchor dragging you down. The child." We can't stay. Not here, where every glance judges. Emotional separation cracked open, her resolve to protect him mirroring his guilt. Trust broke, not in lies, but in the cost. She rose, gathering her shawl, the swell of her belly a poignant reminder. "No," he protested, standing. "We face it together." But she shook her head, tears welling. "Together? You've lost your world for ghosts. Go to your board. Fight. I'll find my way." The ultimato social, her withdrawal, exilio emotional forcing him alone into the fray. As she turned toward the door, a carriage horn blared outside. Jonathan's waiting. The separation loomed literal now as she slipped past him, descending the stairs alone. Alexander watched from the window, heart pounding, the city swallowing her figure. Vanderbilt's attack had landed. The wound deep, no turning back. But what price for redemption? The board awaited, and with it, a deeper plunge. The boardroom of the New York Central Railroad hummed with tension, cigar smoke curling like serpents around the mahogany table. Alexander sat at the far end, his chair feeling like a throne turned scaffold. 12 men in pinstripe suits and gold watch chains eyed him, bankers with ledgers sharp as knives, directors who'd built fortunes on his vision. Jonathan Pierce flanked him, mustache twitching, a silent bulwark. Outside the rain-slicked windows of the headquarters on Broadway, the city pulsed indifferent, horse-drawn omnibuses splashing through puddles. "Mr. Harrington," began Elias Thorne, the senior director, a gaunt man with spectacles perched on a hawkish nose. His voice cut the haze. "The Vanderbilt withdrawal is catastrophic. Coal supplies dry up, investors bolt, and this personal scandal? The papers paint you as unreliable. We demand clarity." Alexander's hands clenched under the table. The morning's confrontation with Cornelius and Eliza still burned. Torn letters, ultimatums, Olivia's retreating figure vanishing into the crowd. He'd searched the streets after, heart hammering, but she'd slipped away like smoke. Now, isolation clawed at him. Clarity! The Vanderbilts orchestrated this, years ago too. He slid a worn envelope across the table, the one from his desk, Olivia's undelivered pleas, intercepted by spies. "They knew of my past with Miss Langford, blocked her letters to force my hand into the merger." Murmurs rippled. Thorne snatched the envelope, scanning the faded ink. Manipulation? Proof? More, Alexander pressed, pulling a small ledger from his coat, a book of accounts from his early days, unearthed in the townhouse attic that frantic afternoon. Pages yellowed. Entries in his own hand showed consulting fees funneled to Vanderbilt informants. They bought silence, my silence, to bind me to Eliza, their puppet strings on my lines. The room erupted. Jonathan leaned in, whispering, "Bold, Alex, but risky." A peak of hope surged, eyes widening, nods of outrage. Thorne slammed the ledger shut. "This, if true, indicts them. But your reputation..." A door banged open. A clerk, breathless, thrust a telegram into Thorne's hand. "From the Commodore's offices, sir." Thorne read, face paling. Vanderbilt's response, a counter-accusation of fraud in Alexander's Western deals, threatening lawsuits to seize his shares. The valley plunged deep, danger amplified, the antagonist's claws sinking in. Board members shifted, whispers turning to doubts. "If they strike first," one muttered. Alexander rose, voice steel. "They won't. Not alone." But inside, despair gnawed. Olivia, where was she? The child? He'd lost them both to this web of deceit. Across town, in a dim boarding house on the Bowery, Olivia huddled by a cracked window, rain pattering like accusations. Mrs. Grady, the widow landlady, bustled in with a shawl. "That Tycoon fellow. Papers say you caused his downfall. Foolish girl, dragging wood in your state." The room reeked of boiled cabbage and damp wool. beds crammed with immigrant families whispering in Yiddish and Italian. Olivia's hand rested on her belly, the babe kicking defiantly. The locket hung at her throat, a talisman of resolve. She'd fled the townhouse to spare Alexander further ruin, but isolation bred clarity. In her reticule, a crumpled Tribune clipping, Harrington exposed, illicit affair derails dynasty. Lies, twisted by Eliza's pen. Enough, she couldn't hide any more. Pulling a stub of pencil and scrap paper from her sewing kit, Olivia wrote, not begging letters this time, a public missive, bold and unyielding. To the editors of the New York Times, she began, ink smudging under hurried strokes. She detailed the truth. Alexander's abandonment under Vanderbilt pressure, the intercepted correspondence, her survival in the shadows. No victimhood, just facts. Her agency's fire, society's tycoons build on broken lives. I stand for the overlooked, the women erased by ambition. She folded it. Heart pounding, a peak of determination lit her, hope in reclaiming her voice. Mrs. Grady watched, eyes softening. Post it, they'll crucify you. Better crucified than silent, Olivia replied, sealing it with wax from a candle. She slipped out into the drizzle, mailing it at the corner post. The act shifted something, perception altering, from fallen woman to whistleblower. Whispers would spread, not of shame, but reckoning. By evening, Alexander returned to the empty townhouse, the board's vote hanging, probation, not ouster, thanks to the ledger's revelations. But victory soured without her. Patrick met him at the door. A note, sir, from the lady. Olivia's script, I've spoken, the truth is out. Meet me at the opera tomorrow. Vanderbilt's box seat's empty now. We end this publicly. Reapproximation stirred, trust over passion, her initiative drawing him back. He clutched the paper, a quiet warmth blooming amid the chill. She'd reframed him, not cold ambition, but duty twisted by manipulation. Guilt lifted slightly, replaced by alliance, yet the valley deepened. A knock, Jonathan, face grim. Vanderbilt's counterstrike. Eliza's testifying at a society assembly tonight, claims you're unstable, the child of fabrication. They're summoning you to refute, or be branded liar. Indignation peaked against the villains, the Commodore's empire of deceit, Eliza's vengeful sabotage. Alexander's fists balled. Olivia's letter had advanced them, but the threat loomed larger, public confrontation at the opera. Where high society gathered like wolves, he straightened. Then we go, together. The gas lamps flickered on, illuminating a path to decisive battle. But as Alexander prepared, a shadow crossed the window, Eliza's carriage, idling across the street, eyes watching. The web tightened. The grand chandelier of the Academy of Music glittered like a constellation brought to earth, casting a golden haze over the sea of silk gowns and tuxedos. The Opera House on 14th Street buzzed with the elite of New York, matrons in jeweled tiaras fanning themselves, gentlemen adjusting cufflinks as the orchestra tuned strings for Verdi's Aida. Alexander Harrington entered through the velvet-draped lobby, his arm steady under Olivia's hand. She moved with quiet grace. Her simple grey wool dress, borrowed and altered hastily, hugging her form without apology, the swell of her belly a bold declaration amid the bustles and corsets. No veil or finery for her, just the locket at her throat, gleaming like a badge of truth. They climbed the stairs to the Vanderbilt box, now empty after the scandal's chill. Whispers chased them like shadows. That's her, the printer's girl, Harrington's folly. Olivia's letter in the Times that morning had ignited the tinder. Headlines screaming of intercepted correspondence, Vanderbilt manipulations, a tycoon's empire built on silenced hearts. Society teetered, curiosity outweighing scorn for now. Inside the box, crimson curtains framed the view of the stage below, where extras in Egyptian garb milled in rehearsal. Alexander guided Olivia to a plush seat, his frock coat crisp, but his eyes scanning the crowd. Jonathan Pierce slipped in behind them, nodding grimly. "The board's watching from the orchestra. Thorne's here. And Eliza. She's in the Astor box with her father." Olivia's hand tightened on his. "This is it. No more hiding." Her voice held steel, forged in tenement nights, and now sharpened by public ink. The overture swelled, horns blaring triumph, but tension coiled tighter than the strings. Halfway through the first act, as Aida's aria soared with longing, a hush fell over the boxes. Elias Thorne rose from his seat below, flanked by two directors, and ascended the stairs. Murmurs rippled. He entered the Vanderbilt box without invitation, his gaunt face flushed under the gaslights. "Harrington, this spectacle you're doing, the Times piece reeks of desperation. Vanderbilt claims forgery. Eliza's prepared a dossier to prove it." Alexander stood, blocking Thorne's view of Olivia. "Desperation, try revelation. Those letters, Olivia's words, stolen by your allies." He drew the ledger from his coat, its leather worn but pages damning. "And this, payments to spies dated to my early mergers. Cornelius bought loyalty, buried truths to chain me." Thorne snatched it, flipping pages, but his eyes widened. Below, the audience stirred, necks craning. Then the sabotage struck. A liveried usher approached, bowing low to Olivia. "Miss Langford, a message from Miss Vanderbilt." He handed her a sealed packet, elegant but ominous. She broke it open, gasping. Inside, a stack of letters, not hers, but forgeries, crude mimics in her hand, accusing Alexander of abandonment for gain, painting her as gold digger. Tucked among them, a witness statement from a former servant, bought no doubt, swearing she'd seen Olivia with another man in the tenements. The box erupted in whispers as Thorne read aloud, voice carrying, This buries you. Fraud, deceit. The board votes tonight." Eliza's work, clear as the crest on the paper, final venom, a bought testimony to shatter their stand. Olivia rose, colour draining but chin high. The aria peaked, Radames declaring forbidden love, mirroring their own. She seized the moment, voice clear over the music. "Lies, those aren't my words. I've scrubbed floors, carried wood, survived your world's scraps. Alexander didn't abandon me, your Commodore did, with spies and sealed envelopes." She pulled the locket free, opening it to the miniature. "This is truth, and my letters intercepted. Ask Patrick, my driver." He saw the couriers turned away. Patrick, summoned earlier by Jonathan, appeared at the box's edge, cap in hand. The Irishman, loyal through years, stepped forward. "Aye, sir. Vanderbilt men, paid to watch, burned the missives in the alley." Gasps echoed from adjacent boxes. Thorne's face twisted, the forgery crumbling under scrutiny. Below, Cornelius Vanderbilt lumbered to his feet in the Astor box, beard quivering, but Eliza halted him, her face ashen. The dossier's architect exposed. Alexander pressed the attack, ledger open. "Gentlemen, see the dates. Coal rights traded for silence, not business, blackmail." He turned to the growing crowd, peering up, voices hushing the orchestra mid-note. "This city thrives on rails, but not on ruined lives. Olivia speaks for the forgotten. I stand with her." The shift rippled like a wave. Mrs. Worthington from her box nearby lowered her fan, eyes softening. Clara beside her clapped softly, then louder. Applause built, sporadic at first, then thunderous. Directors nodding, matrons murmuring approval. Thorne closed the ledger, handing it back. "Enough. The board reconsiders. Vanderbilt's reach exposed." The community reframed them, from scandal's outcasts to society's conscience, humiliated no more. Eliza fled her box, skirts vanishing down the aisle, Cornelius trailing in impotent rage. Public humiliation stung. The Commodore's empire cracked, whispers turning to jeers below. Victory surged, cathartic, validating every tear, every kick felt in secret. Alexander and Olivia stood together, hands clasped, the aria resolving in triumphant harmony. If you're gripped by this tale of love and redemption, hit that subscribe button now, so you don't miss another heart-pounding story from the channel. The curtain fell on the act, applause masking the hush that followed. Their hush. In the box's dim glow, Alexander drew Olivia close, not in passion's rush, but a tacit vow. Shoulders touching, eyes locked in silent promise. The storm passed, but dawn's light waited, whispering of legacies yet to build. Yet outside, a shadowed figure lingered in the lobby, Eliza's courier, envelope in hand, hinting the web hadn't fully unraveled. The morning after the opera, sunlight pierced the tall windows of Alexander's townhouse library, chasing away the shadows of the night before. The room, once a bastion of solitary deals, now hummed with purpose. Stacks of legal papers covered the oak desk, flanked by the ledger and Olivia's published letter, artifacts of their stand. Alexander stood by the mantel, his frock coat unbuttoned, sleeves rolled as he reviewed documents with Jonathan Pierce. The lawyer's mustache curled in satisfaction, a far cry from the grim lines of days past. "Thorns on board," Jonathan said, tapping a fresh contract. The board voted unanimously. Vanderbilt's fraud claims? Dismissed. Your Western lines get independent coal suppliers, better terms even, and the Commodore. He's facing inquiries from the Attorney General, intercepted mail, bribery, enough to strip his influence in the legislature. He chuckled dryly. Exiled to his yachts, most like. No more pulling strings from Washington Square. Alexander nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. The antagonist's fall was concrete. Cornelius Vanderbilt, the iron-fisted titan, reduced to defending his empire in courtrooms, his prestige crumbling like overmined coal. Eliza, too, bore the cost, her social circle closing ranks, invitations drying up as whispers branded her the architect of deceit. No arrest, no spectacle, but a quiet sanction, loss of alliances, her dowry dreams shattered. She'd retreated to the family estate upstate, a neutral repositioning forced by scandal's chill. Upstairs, Olivia moved through the guest chamber with newfound ease, the pains of her condition subdued by rest and resolve. She wore a simple day dress of soft muslin, altered to accommodate her belly, its high neckline modest yet elegant. Fabrics from Alexander's stores, chosen without the extravagance of Paris labels. The locket rested against her chest, but today she set it aside on the vanity. A chapter closed. Servants bustled below, preparing a modest breakfast, fresh scones, eggs poached in cream, no silver service pomp. She descended the stairs slowly, hand on the polished banister, and entered the library. Alexander turned, his eyes lighting with quiet joy. Not the Tycoon's calculated gaze, but a man's transformed by compassion. "The papers are signed," he said, crossing to her. "Our lines stand, and Vanderbilt, he's paid for his shadows." Olivia smiled, touching his arm. "Not just lines, lives." Her voice carried the steady timbre of one who'd spoken truths in public glare, her leadership emerging in subtle commands to the staff earlier. Arranging donations for tenement midwives, drawing from Alexander's coffers. No longer the haunted woman of the streets, she embodied change. Voice clear, eyes forward, guiding without demand. Jonathan bowed slightly. "Miss Langford, your letter swayed them. The board sees you as ally now, not scandal." He gathered his papers, rewarded with a partnership stake in the reformed company. Loyalty honored. "I'll handle the filings. Leave the rest to me." With a nod, he departed, the door clicking softly behind him. Alone, the air shifted, intimate yet equal. Alexander led her to the window seat overlooking Fifth Avenue. where carriages trundled past under a clear sky. No grand gestures, instead he drew a small velvet pouch from his pocket. Inside lay a simple gold band, unadorned, no family crest or inherited stone, forged fresh in a discreet jeweller's shop. "No past in this," he murmured, slipping it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. A ritual born of choice, sealing their bond as partners in a world remade. She traced the band, then met his gaze. "Equals," she whispered. Their lips brushed then. A kiss of love, soft and unhurried, tasting of scones and second chances. No fire of youth's haste, but the depth of shared trials, lips parting with a shared breath. Outside, the avenue bustled. Newsboys hawking tales of reform. Matrons nodding as they passed. No averted eyes now, but tentative respect. The new equilibrium took shape swiftly. Alexander restructured his holdings, channeling profits into a legacy, the Langford Foundation, named for her father, funding print shops and schools for working women in the Lower East Side. Olivia oversaw the first, a modest building on the Bowery, its walls lined with presses and desks where immigrant girls learned letters by gaslight. No opulent galas. Instead, quiet openings. Her hand steady as she cut the ribbon with Alexander beside her. Coadjuvants found their places. Patrick, the doorman, rose to estate manager, his family housed in a cottage on Alexander's upstate lands. Mrs. Worthington, once a thorn, sent a note of apology. Repositioned as patron to the foundation, her daughter Clara volunteering lessons. Even Thorne attended the school's dedication, cigar in hand, toasting the rails of education. Months later, as autumn leaves gilded Central Park, Olivia's time came. In the townhouse's birthing chamber, warmed by a crackling hearth, she labored with Dr. Ellis's guidance. Alexander held her hand through the hours, his whispers steady, strong, like us. The cry pierced the night. A son, robust and red-faced, wrapped in soft flannel. They named him Elias, after no Tycoon, but for the dawn of their truth. By the window, babe at her breast, Olivia looked out at the horizon, rails snaking west, schools rising east, a future unburdened. Alexander knelt beside her, arm around her shoulders, watching the city they'd reshaped. "This is our empire," he said. She leaned into him, the band glinting. But as peace settled, a soft knock echoed, Patrick with a letter, postmarked from upstate. Eliza's script. "Forgive the pain I caused. May our paths cross in better days." No threat, just a bridge extended, hinting at mending threads. The family turned back to the view, the child's coo blending with the distant train whistle, a symphony of triumph, horizons endless. 10 years had woven their quiet tapestry over the brownstone on Fifth Avenue, softening the edges of old scars while etching new lines of laughter and legacy. The townhouse stood much as it had, its wrought iron gates polished brighter now, gas lamps replaced by the steady glow of electric fixtures that Alexander had installed after the city's wires finally reached the elite streets. But inside, the air hummed with a different rhythm. Not the tense whispers of scandal, but the patter of small feet and the rustle of turning pages from the study. Alexander Harrington, at 45, moved with the assured stride of a man who'd traded ruthless boardrooms for balanced ledgers. His hair, once dark and slicked back, now threaded with silver at the temples, framed a face softened by time and fatherhood. He wore a simple wool vest over a crisp shirt, no cravat today, as he knelt in the garden conservatory, helping his son Elias, now a lanky boy of 9, plant tulip bulbs in the rich soil. "Firmly but gentle," Alexander instructed, his hands guiding Elias's smaller ones. The boy, with Olivia's green eyes and his father's determined jaw, grinned up, dirt smudged on his cheek. "Like laying tracks, Pa? Steady so they don't derail?" Elias asked, his voice carrying the curiosity of a child raised on tales of iron rails and hidden truths. Sanitized for bedtime but laced with the era's grit, Alexander chuckled, a deep, warm sound that echoed off the glass walls blooming with roses and ferns. Exactly like that. But these tracks lead to spring, not steel. The conservatory, once a forgotten wing, now served as their private haven, a nod to the simple joys Olivia had always craved. Beyond the panes, Central Park unfurled in autumn gold, leaves drifting like forgotten invitations to old galas. Upstairs, Olivia Harrington surveyed the nursery from the doorway, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. At 38, she carried the poise of a woman who'd reshaped her world, her figure rounded gently by two more children, a daughter, Grace, at 6, with curls like her grandmother's, and a toddler son, Samuel, napping in his cradle. Her gown, a soft cashmere in muted blue, draped without the rigid corsets of youth, its high collar and modest bustle reflecting the subtle shifts in fashion as the century waned. No longer the muddied figure hauling wood, she was the architect of change, her hands smooth now from guiding pens rather than scrubbing linens. The Langford Foundation had flourished under her stewardship, its reach stretching from Bowery print shops to women's academies in Brooklyn and beyond. Immigrants' daughters learned typesetting by daylight, their voices rising in choruses of empowerment that echoed Olivia's own letter from a decade past. Alexander's railroads, reformed and ethical, funded it all. No Vanderbilt shadows, just fair wages and community ties. Their marriage, sealed in a quiet ceremony at Trinity Church 2 years after the opera triumph, had been a vow of equals. No dynastic pomp, just family and a handful of true allies like Jonathan Pierce, now a partner and godfather to Elias. She smiled at the sight below, memories flickering like lantern slides. The love had endured, not as the fiery spark of stolen nights, but as a steady flame, nurtured through board meetings where she'd advised on labor reforms, quiet evenings reading Dickens aloud, and the shared ache of building from ruins. Alexander's ambition had mellowed, channeled into sustainable lines that connected cities without crushing souls. Hers had bloomed from survivor to leader, her speeches at foundation galas drawing nods from former skeptics like Mrs. Worthington, whose Clara now taught elocution classes. Yet not all had mended without cost. Cornelius Vanderbilt had paid dearly for his machinations, his health failing amid legal battles that stripped him of legislative sway, dying in isolation on his yacht 3 years after the opera. His empire fractured among squabbling heirs. Eliza, once the poised heiress, had withdrawn to Europe, her marriage to a minor baron a union of convenience rather than passion. Whispers reached New York of her quiet philanthropy in Paris salons, a redemption sought in exile, but the price lingered, a life untethered from the power she'd wielded so sharply. Jonathan often remarked on it over brandy, his own family thriving. Wife and 3 children in a Gramercy Park home, loyalty rewarded with equity shares. Olivia descended the stairs, her skirts whispering against the polished oak. Elias spotted her first, bounding over with a bulb clutched in his fist. "Mama, look! Pa says these will be red like your old locket." The locket itself rested in a velvet box upstairs, its miniature faded but cherished, a symbol evolved from pain to pride. Alexander rose, brushing soil from his hands, and drew her into a light embrace, his arm around her waist as Grace toddled in, clutching a doll. "Our tracks are blooming," he murmured, lips brushing her temple. The gesture was familiar, intimate without excess, a decade's worth of trust woven into touch. She leaned into him, watching Elias chase his sister through the ferns. Samuel stirred above, his cry a joyful summons. The family gathered, the conservatory filling with laughter that drowned out the distant clatter of cable cars. Society had shifted around them. women's voices growing bolder in suffrage parlours, railroads bending to fairer laws. Their love had withstood the tempests, time only deepening the roots. As evening fell, they supped simply in the dining room. Roast fowl, fresh bread from a foundation bakery, conversation flowing like the Hudson at peace. Alexander raised his glass, eyes meeting Olivia's across the candlelight. "To horizons," he toasted, "and the hands that build them," she replied, her smile radiant. Outside, the city lights twinkled, a testament to endurance. The Tycoon, who'd glimpsed redemption on a muddy avenue, had found it not in fortune, but in the quiet empire of home. And in that warmth, the past whispered forgiveness. The future beckoned wide. As the years turned like the wheels of Alexander's enduring railroads, the Harrington legacy wove itself into the fabric of a changing New York, a city no longer defined solely by gilded excess, but by the quiet revolutions sparked in drawing rooms and tenement halls. Elias grew into a young man of 18, his frame tall and resolute, pursuing studies in engineering at Columbia, where he sketched designs for lines that would carry not just freight, but hope to forgotten corners of the Midwest. Grace, at 16, inherited her mother's fire, advocating for women's reading circles that bloomed across the boroughs, her voice echoing Olivia's in society parlours once hostile. Little Samuel, now a spirited 12-year-old with a penchant for the conservatory's mechanical toys, dreamed of bridges spanning divides greater than rivers, divides of class and chance. Olivia and Alexander, in their mid-40s and 50s, walked arm in arm through Central Park on crisp autumn mornings, their steps measured but unhurried. The locket, long retired to a drawer, had given way to a shared pocket watch, its chain linking their wrists during quiet debates over foundation reports. Their love, tempered by trials, burned steady, evenings by the hearth, her head on his shoulder as they read aloud from fresh printed volumes funded by their efforts. No grand estates abroad. Their world was here, rooted in the townhouse expanded to house foundation offices, its walls lined with photographs. Daguerreotypes from the early days, capturing Elias's first steps amid the roses. The Vanderbilt shadow had faded entirely. Cornelius's heirs scattered their inheritance in legal squabbles, his name a cautionary tale in club whispers, the peril of empires built on silenced truths. Eliza, from her Parisian exile, sent occasional letters, penitent notes of distant goodwill, her life a tapestry of quiet charities that mirrored Olivia's without the sting of rivalry. She'd found a measure of peace, unburdened by New York's relentless gaze, her price paid in solitude, but redeemed in subtle good. What lessons lingered in the air of that enduring home? That ambition without heart derails faster than any faulty track. That truth, spoken boldly, forges rails stronger than steel. Love demands not perfection, but persistence, choosing the human over the hierarchical, the vulnerable over the vaulted. In a gilded age of facades, authenticity gleams brightest, turning scandals into stories that inspire generations to build not just fortunes, but futures. And so, as the family gathered for supper one golden evening, laughter mingling with the clink of silver on china, Alexander raised his glass once more. "To the choices that carry us forward," he said, eyes locking with Olivia's across the table, where Elias and the children nodded, their faces alight with the promise of paths untaken by their parents' ghosts. Outside, the city thrummed, a symphony of progress, where once divided lives converged. The Tycoon's glance on that fateful avenue had not ended a wedding, but begun a dynasty of the soul, proving that redemption arrives not in gold, but in the grit to rewrite one's rails. If this tale of love's unyielding track has stirred your heart, drop a comment below, sharing what moved you most. Did Olivia's courage or Alexander's awakening resonate deepest? And to show you've journeyed to the end with us, write the word horizon in your reply. It'll help spread this story to fellow dreamers. Don't forget to like if the drama kept you hooked, and subscribe for more gripping Gilded Age sagas that blend heartbreak with triumph. Check the cards for similar narratives waiting to unfold. Your next adventure starts now.